Does your organization need more nurses? Struggling to connect with RNs where they spend time? Budgets are tight, there's a scarcity of applicants, and using travelers can cost up to an additional $150,000 per year. It's time for a superior solution. It's time to work with the experts. Like us. Since 2019, healthcare providers throughout the US and Canada have successfully engaged and recruited thousands of candidates using nurse recruitment experts' three-step advertising, screening, and consultative process. We help healthcare providers reach further with their advertising, discover hidden gems, and mobilize the power of their employer brand in nurse recruitment. With results based pricing and no long term commitments, we are the most cost effective and low risk partner for your nurse recruitment needs. So why not take your nurse recruitment to the experts? Visit nurserecruitmentx.com.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Nurse Recruitment Experts webinar. We are happy to be here today with you, and we're going to be speaking about nurse retention, such an important topic. I'm Patrick Thiele. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer, with Nurse Recruitment Experts. And please, I'm going to put my LinkedIn on the screen, so please feel free to reach out to me and we can connect anytime. If you're interested to learn either more about nurse retention, I can connect you up, or of course, also about our company, Nurse Recruitment Experts. We work with healthcare organizations in the USA and Canada to help them find and hire more nurses. And we also provide a consultative service to our clients to support their internal recruitment and retention efforts as well. So again, please feel free to reach out to me, and you can always also, of course, reach out. Check out our website. I'm going to put that on the screen here as well and in the chat. And it is nurserecruitmentx, the letter X.com. So you can find our website there. So I want to mention also that we are currently conducting market research into how AI could improve job seeking for nurses. And I know our audience will have a lot to contribute on this topic. So I'd love to invite each of you to reach out to me on LinkedIn again, or in the chat here today, and I'll send you the survey link. It only takes 3 minutes, and we'll enter your name into a draw for an Amazon gift card, so why not? So please do let me know if you're interested in doing that. Okay, and now moving on to the topic of today's webinar. As I mentioned, it's a big one, nurse retention. It's so important these days in this challenging recruitment and healthcare market. I want to start off by introducing our guest today. The first guest I'll introduce is Whitney Floyd. Whitney is a regional talent engagement manager with PAM Health, and she's joining us from Hammond, Louisiana today. And Whitney has 15 years in management and HR roles, including the past 3 years in HR and talent engagement with PAM Health. Thanks for joining us today, Whitney.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Awesome, good. And I'm going to put your LinkedIn on the screen as well. And if people have questions or want to connect with you after, they can do that way as well. Great. Thanks again, Whitney. And Molly, welcome back. You're a returning webinar guest, and some will recognize you. Molly Weaver is the founder of Sunflower Talent Strategies, which she created after spending 13 years with Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City, Missouri. And she was the director and senior director of talent acquisition at Children's Mercy Hospital. And Molly, as I said, has joined webinars in the past, including on retention. So welcome back, Molly. We're happy to have you here as well. And I'm going to put your LinkedIn on the screen also. Welcome.
Thank you.
Oh,
I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Good. So Molly's is coming on the screen. Here we go. Great. And now I mentioned, Molly, you've participated in some webinars on the very topic of healthcare and nurse retention. We always get a lot of feedback and interest in people wanting to know more about this topic. So I thought I would also share a couple of resources. So one is that we recently released our nurse retention report that you can find again on our website at nurserecruitmentx.com. And I'm going to share, just so you can see on the screen what that looks like. But with the nurse retention report, we reached out to 2,000 nurses and asked them what they want and what keeps them in their job. So this is the report that you can find again on our website, on our blog page on our website. And in that report, when we conducted that survey with 2,000 nurses, we found that 55% of nurse retention is driven by interpersonal relationships and the working environment. I won't go into that, but I think it lines up with what we're going to discuss today. Let me just get a quick feedback from Molly and Whitney. Does that sound familiar? Is that what you deal with retention? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think those are themes we're going to hear through our conversation today. And also on the retention topic, we recently posted, just last week actually, our blog called 21 Cutting Edge Nurse Recruitment Strategies. And that's also, again, if you go to our website and go to our blog page, you'll find that. And we had analyzed the latest industry insights and identified 25 innovative and effective nurse recruitment strategies that healthcare experts, HR experts are using in 2023. And so if you go to the blog page, you'll see that and you can read all the details. But with that in mind, we thought that it would be really interesting to have a webinar discussion on this topic with some experts in the field to explore a few of these strategies and these themes. And we want to talk about why some of these are important, what they see that's working, and any new approaches that they plan to undertake in the coming months or years. So today we've asked Whitney and Molly to pull out a few strategies and themes from the list, and we're going to talk about each of them today. So let's just stop there and start again. And you said, both of you said that you agree with that the challenges of that we found in our report, that nurse retention is driven by interpersonal relationships and working environment. All of that fits and covers the theme that we're talking about. What are you generally seeing in nurse retention these days from either in your workplace or the clients you work with?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Molly.
Go ahead, Whitney. You're good.
Whitney, go ahead. Sorry.
So in the hospital setting right now with nurses, from the retention side, and especially when you're talking about the work environment, they want to make sure that they're working in a safe environment. They want it to be safe for them as well as the patients, but they're also the interpersonal skills, the environment that's being created by the leaders, right? A lot of times that drives the experience for the nurses and what they're encountering on a daily basis. So if they don't feel those connections with the leadership team, they're more than likely to leave. So that's it.
Okay, great. And Molly, what are your general thoughts about retention, or general observations, I guess I should say?
You know, I talk a lot to both nurses and leaders, and I think the mindset shift that happened during the pandemic, Whitney made me laugh a little earlier. She actually started in healthcare in the middle of the pandemic. God bless you, Whitney. But, before the pandemic, I think people put their work on the calendar and they built their life around their work schedule. And I think post-pandemic, a lot of people want to build their life first and build their work around their life. And that's the fundamental shift, I think, a lot of employees have made, but I don't think employers have made that same shift. That flexibility is huge, because we really believe today that time is short and our personal relationships are valuable at more than we maybe did pre-pandemic, if you will.
Interesting. Yeah. And I know that's on the list of some of the things you want to talk about today as well. Yeah. I did reach out to a bunch of people, our team did, that signed up for today's webinar on LinkedIn, and we asked them, just give us your feedback. What are you seeing these days? And we heard some of what you're talking about already. Both of you made comments that bounce back in the feedback from people, including about challenges with leadership and challenges for leadership. I've had people come back and say that nurse retention is good right now. The turnover is low for really smaller organizations, newer organizations. And then others that said it's been around 18%, 30%. One said 20 to 30%. One said over 40%. So it's a challenge. I mean, those are really challenging numbers and difficult for an organization. And certainly when we spend most of our time in nurse recruitment, and boy, that's a challenge when it's that hole in the bucket, right? That leaky bucket. If we can keep nurses in place, it's going to make it a lot easier on the recruitment side. So interesting to hear that feedback. And I'd encourage people to feel free to put your comments in the chat about what you're seeing in your organization in terms of retention, what your challenges are, any questions you have for Whitney or Molly. Feel free to put those in the chat. It's always interesting to see what people are thinking while we're having the conversation. So let's move into the conversation about some of those themes that we pulled out from our 21 Strategies blog post. So Molly, can we start with you? You wanted to talk about comprehensive nurse engagement surveys. And I know that this will also feed into one that Whitney wanted to talk about, which is about encouraging continuous feedback. So maybe we'll go back and forth with both of you on this, but let's start with Molly about nurse engagement surveys. What are your thoughts about this topic?
I think those annual organization-wide engagement surveys are great and they serve a purpose, but they shouldn't be the only time of the year you're asking people for feedback. And I would say I can tell you stories of a particular unit at the hospital that was having a lot of turnover, and we went in and we said, what's causing this? What do you need? And you know what it boiled down to is they wanted us to paint their break room, get them a microwave that worked, and a TV in their break room. And I'm like, good gracious, that's fairly inexpensive. But no one had sat down and said, really, what is it? What is causing the turmoil? And so it is done more locally. And I will tell you, I was telling somebody the other day, I've been flying a lot lately. And I've been in several airports where at the bathroom, when you're leaving, it says, how's your experience today? And there's a part of me that says that those should be as on the wall next to the time clock and really give you. So if you're running at a pretty good, everybody's at an 80% smiley face, and then you hit a particular Tuesday and it's a 20% smiley face, what happened that day? What were, and that would give you more real time feedback of where the issue is. Right. And I think, and that's when you said comprehensive nurse engagement surveys. I think it's all things. Yes, the annual survey is great, but layer in some additional feedback that asks them more specifically what it is that is causing. In my world, I used to ask my team a lot, tell me about the rocks in your shoes, because those little irritants, and you guys all know everybody's had a rock in their shoe at one time or another. Those little irritants add up over time. So if you say once a week, what's the rocks in your shoes? And you work to correct those things. And most of the time they're pretty simple and kind of silly. But, like I can remember one time, one of my team members was like, why do we have to enter it over here and over here? And I'm like, well, why do you have to do that? And by the end of the week, we had figured out that they didn't need to, and we had made some adjustments. It's that showing anytime you ask for feedback, making sure that they know you heard them and they correct for it.
Yeah. And even, people might say, well, painting the break room is really almost unrelated to the work, right? Or getting the microwave. But again, it's a rock in the shoe, and it sets the tone, and it's about the culture of the organization. And if they feel they're respected in that way, like they have a bright and cheery and comfortable place to have a break, then it can really set the tone for the rest of the work. That's really interesting. I love the reference to the surveys in the airport bathrooms. I always wonder where those go and who pays attention to them, but I think that's a great idea. It would also show you which unit has got the bigger problems, right?
Right. I think, I don't know. It's been in my head. So now it's out in the world. So hopefully somebody will figure out how to do it.
Great. Well, and as I mentioned, Whitney, you had said that you wanted to talk about encouraging continuous feedback. So what can you add, or what are your thoughts about what Molly said?
So Molly made a really good point when she said that the things that they wanted were really simple, right? They wanted a microwave, they wanted a TV, and they wanted to paint. The issue wasn't that they wanted that. It was that no one had sought out that feedback. So when you want to encourage continuous feedback, that has to be driven by the leaders, right? They have to demonstrate, first of all, they need to be going seek it out, right? And then they have to demonstrate a willingness to receive open suggestions. So when they make these suggestions, what's the action that we take from it? Like once they say, hey, this is the things that we're wanting, what do we do to make that happen? And then we have to be honest about what we can and can't do. In that case, it was very simple as hopefully they got that done right away, and everybody was happy to move on. The other thing is they have to establish clear channels of communicating feedback. So how do we communicate this feedback? Do I just write a letter and give it to someone? Do we have suggestion boxes somewhere, right? Are there regular team meetings or surveys that are going on where I can provide this feedback? And then they need to allow for some information to be given anonymously as well. Sometimes people want to provide feedback, but they're afraid of retaliation for whatever reason, right? Because it's not always that they're going to be singing praises. Sometimes they're going to be coming with issues or complaints. So provide where they can provide create a situation where they can provide the information anonymously. And then I think this is really important too, to provide training on how to give feedback. Sometimes the feedback that's given is lost because it sounds like complaints or it sounds like they're just griping, right? So I think managers and leaders have to be trained on how to receive feedback and how to navigate situations and ask certain questions. But then employees have to be trained on how to give constructive feedback, right? Not just coming in and saying, well, I feel like this, I feel like this. What are actionable items that we can take that, create an environment where you want to be? But it has to be driven by leadership. They have to go and seek out the information.
Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah, it's about setting a culture, right? And a tone that feedback is needed, interested, welcomed, that the organization wants to get that. And as you say, give lots of opportunities, different ways of providing feedback. And as again, you touched on both public or like feedback with your name on it, maybe in a group, maybe in an interview, but also the chance to provide anonymous. Because even if you're providing it in a group or in a survey with your name on it, there might be things that you'd prefer to put anonymously. So both ways make a lot of sense. That's good advice. Okay, great. Any other thoughts about that before we move on?
I used to tell my team, I had a motto, one of my many mottos, but one of them was, if you oppose, propose. So I'm like, yeah, you can say I don't like to do it this way. So propose me a better way, and I am here to listen to it. And that would at least get them telling me what they opposed to. So
sure.
I'm stealing that, Molly.
I remember starting a new job as a manager many years ago and going around and meeting my team that was working in different parts of the province. I'm Canadian, or the province I was working in, and sitting down with one of the staff and asked him, like, give me some feedback. What could be different? What could be better? And he said, well, for one thing, when the managers come in and talk to us, I want to know that they're doing more with my feedback than just writing it in their little book. So he felt, look at all the notes they're taking. They're really listening to me. And then they left and he never heard anything about it again. So I've always remembered that people really need to know that you're paying attention and they see some results coming out of it, right? Even if you can't do it, they want to understand that you've looked into it and check that out. So great. Oh, that's really good. All really good feedback input. Thank you. So Molly, you also want to talk about something very practical about flexible shift patterns and how important that is to nurses to make them feel that it will accommodate their life and they can stay in their job. Tell us about that.
Yeah, first of all, Taylor Davis has been putting some great stuff in the chat. And I agree with you, Taylor, that all of this doesn't work without us making sure that they're safe and that the patient care is at the priority. And I think, unfortunately, nurses don't think perhaps that you are because you're short-staffed, and they don't realize that on the recruiting side, it's really hard to find nurses right now. Right. And so when we talk about or think about flexible scheduling, I think we have to rethink how we schedule and how much flexibility and control over the schedule that we give our nurses. So for example, instead of saying you're going to work every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday night, say you're going to work 3 shifts a week. We set our schedules every 6 weeks. You'll have the opportunity to select schedules in whatever order or whatever. I think those kind of small, giving them small control over it. And then I also think our leadership has to rethink, and I will go back to, I had another unit that was highly specialized that had a full-time nurse opening for 6 months. And we had been looking for somebody with a specialty background that they needed. And I found somebody, and I was so excited, but she could only work part-time. And so I took her to the leader, and I set the resume on her desk, and I'm like, I found you somebody. And her response was, I will wait for somebody full-time. And I'm like, something is better than nothing. And I think that's where we have to help our leaders start to understand that with the demographic changes and with the pressure on healthcare and the number of baby boomers retiring and not as many people going into nursing right now, all of those pressures are going to make it harder and harder to find the perfect person to fit. And just saying, oh, I'll wait for the next one, or I need another one, isn't going to get them to where they need to be. So I think we need to see leaders be more flexible, but we also have to give our nurses more control. I love, and I've looked at a lot of apps that allow nurses to swap shifts within an app, or pick up extra shifts within an app. That's what I think our population is looking for. That flexibility. Again, going back to what I said earlier, it's about building my work life around my life. So my life schedule is going to go on the calendar first, and work has to be around what I already have committed to.
Sure. And there's all types of nurses and families and situations, and employers have to try and accommodate everyone instead of the old school way of making all the nurses fit our format, right? And so, and as you say, if my employer doesn't give me that opportunity to select my shifts or go to part-time for a while, if that's what I need, hey, there's like you say, I might go to one of those other opportunities that will let me select a shift, one of the gig apps and so on, which is great. There's a place for that. But if you're trying to keep full-time employees and part-time employees in your organization, then you have to be more flexible. So really interesting. Great. Thank you. You said something else too about the hiring managers, and there really is a need for some still to come along with us and be a little more, think a little bit differently about hiring. I mean, they have such pressure in their units to fill the need and to keep everyone happy on their unit. But I think, Whitney, I think you were on at this call when I heard this recently, when one of the frustrations from talent acquisition was that the hiring manager was saying, I don't know, I just don't love them. What does that mean? In fact, Whitney, was that your example? I don't know if it was your example. Maybe that's why I remember. Do you want to speak to that a little bit, since I brought it up?
Well, so yes, because it is frustrating. And like Molly said, she found this candidate that was really, really good, right? Check all the boxes. And the only thing was time. Like, let's just be more flexible and figure that out. And instead, I'm just going to pass completely, right? So one of the points that was made on that call, though, and I think it's so critical, is that one of the guys said, if a candidate has 70% to 75% of what you're looking for, that's a candidate. So I think we need to redefine what we're calling a candidate, because in Molly's case, they weren't even asked to give up anything. This person had everything. It was just time. So we can't figure out anything. And there's a lot of catching up to do from hiring manager standpoint, because there's still a very old way of thinking. So there needs to be like a mindset shift that needs to take place for them to get caught up to where we are. I think we are, because we're living and dealing with it, and they just receive the candidates that we put in front of them, right? But they don't realize all of the conversations. So maybe we're not doing that good of a job of educating them and saying, hey, so this is what's going on now, or they're not listening. I'm not sure.
I think I would agree with you, Whitney. And I actually have gone into several hospitals and provided that service to talent acquisition teams, of being the person that says, this is the reality of the labor market. And, you can look at demographics and you will see that we go up in high school graduations till 2025, and then we kind of go off a cliff. And I loved a group of leaders that I was talking to, and they're like, well, we can change that, can't we? And I'm like, not unless we can produce fully fledged 5-year-olds because this is based on the kids that went into kindergarten. So no, we can't change that trajectory overnight.
Right.
Over time, perhaps it will change, but it's not going to. And I think most of our leaders came up or grew up in organizations in a time of abundance. And now we are in a time of scarcity, and they haven't made that adjustment.
Right, right. And Whitney, you had mentioned that you were interested in speaking about work-life integration, and Molly touched on that, and you touched on it. But is there anything more that you wanted to add about that specific topic?
I mean, Molly covered a lot of it, especially with the flexible work arrangements. But one thing maybe organizations could do is figure out how to integrate life more, right? So as a nurse, you can't take your patients home with you. That's not an option. But what if we had a gym on site for nurses, right? What if we did something around childcare? Because my kids right now are school age, but there's going to be Christmas break coming up. There's going to be Thanksgiving break. And teachers have so many breaks right now. Let me just tell you, but I mean, figuring out things that we can do to make their lives easier. Like, what can I do? What can we do here at the hospital where you don't have to think about where your child is going for that 2-week break? They're coming here, right? Everybody get dressed in the morning. We're all going. So just figuring out what we could do to add value and take away versus when am I going to go to the gym? You can go before or after work because it's right here for you. So just those kind of things, maybe just to add to.
And if we're taking away those pressures and those complications from their life, they're more likely to, work then fits, right? And they're able to stay in the job and not turn over and look for somewhere else to work. Okay. Molly, you also wanted to talk about technology, and you've already touched on operational efficiencies a bit. What were your thoughts about that theme, using technology for operational efficiency?
Yeah, Patrick, it was interesting. I know you said you guys are starting researching on AI. I've been doing a deep dive into AI. And what I will tell you is I think we have to learn how to use people differently going forward because, again, there aren't as many of them. So my example for this is here in Kansas City, if you go to McDonald's, I have a 16-year-old son, so we go there quite often because that's just his age range. You drive through the drive-through, and it's a voice recognition software. There is not another person taking your order at the drive-through. And that is because they can't hire enough. So they're keeping their people cooking the food, manning the window, and handing the food out. Those are things we need to think about in healthcare. Where do we use people that perhaps we could use technology and then upskill or reskill those people into higher level jobs and have them do something else? And I think everybody's got to start thinking about work differently and breaking those jobs down and saying, what has to be done by a person, right? There are lots of patient care things that have to be done person to person and face to face and hands on. But what else can you do? One of our hospitals here in Kansas City has a hospital at home program. I think it's fascinating where you are admitted to the hospital within your house, but they monitor you remotely and they're watching you at all times and are able to make interventions when you need to. But again, it is allowing one nurse perhaps to serve more patients and also keeping people in their home environment, which is a gift I think we would all like to have. So I think it's just getting both our leaders and ourselves comfortable with, I think I like it better defined as augmented human intelligence instead of artificial intelligence.
Wow,
that makes it sound a little more palatable.
Very good. And that example, there's all sorts of nurses that would love to be working in home care, working in people's home, and that kind of technology can really broaden the opportunity. That's really interesting. Great. Whitney, anything else that you want to add about that or thoughts from your experience? I'm putting you on the spot now.
It's okay. I just think that's really innovative. I have never heard of anything like that to be admitted from home. So, and I agree with those points of figuring out where we can, because like you said, in going to Taco Bell, there's not a person to take my order. I have to go to the kiosk. So I'm standing there for 3 minutes waiting, and it's like, just go to the kiosk. I'm like, okay, right. So those things will be eliminated, and where we can use technology, let's leverage that so we can have the people, because we're not going to be able to hire out of what we're seeing right now.
Sure.
There's just not enough people to go around.
Sure. And Taylor commented, and I put it on the screen there, that he talks about the fact that nurses patient sitting is a ridiculous waste. So he's talking about some examples. Guthrie using ArtSite, and St. Luke's in Kansas City, maybe you know about this, Molly, is also doing some innovative things as well. So interesting topic to bring up, and we'll share that and let people check that out some more as well. Awesome. Great. Now, Whitney, so a culture of appreciation was high on your list to talk about. Let's talk about how important that is, and beyond just the microwave and painting the break room, talk about how organizations can really build that culture of appreciation.
Right. So again, leaders have to like lead here, and they have to lead by example. There's so much that's being asked of so little people, right? So I mean, with dealing with call-ins with nurses on the floor, the amount of patients that they have that they care for, the amount of work that they do, everything is increased. And sometimes it's hard with seeing, like looking at the big picture, it's hard to smell the roses and just appreciate those little things that go on day to day. So, and I believe a lot of organizations already do this, right? There's some type of employee of the month type of program that exists. But what if we take that a step further and just incorporate like employee spotlights, right? Like look at employees, and we do that on a weekly basis, depending on how large the organization is. Maybe we select one person or two people that we just spotlight that are just doing a really good job. And also, it doesn't just have to be on the leaders, right? I mean, compared to the population of people, the leaders are going to be the minority. So between each other, hey, y'all do employee shout outs. You know, like if you saw an employee or one of your coworkers did something that was really, really good, shout them out. Say, hey, if it's a sticky note, you know, it doesn't have to be something elaborate. We just want to make sure that they're being acknowledged for those things that go miss, but they're significant, you know. Right. So then another thing that companies can do, it's a very, very small gesture, but when I was the HRD a few years ago, I would get all of the leaders to sign a birthday card, and we would mail it to the employees. We wouldn't give it to them at work. We would mail it to them. They would be so excited about this card. They're like, I got my birthday card. I'm like, great, you know, but those kind of things, right? And everybody has a birthday. So, right. You know, everyone will have an opportunity to be recognized at some point. So it's just doing those little things, just acknowledging people. People like to be acknowledged, and it's the small things. It's not necessarily all these big things that will happen, but these little small things.
That's part of the culture, right? Absolutely. It's integrated throughout the years, becomes part of the culture. And it is a small thing. Writing the birthday card and putting it in the mail is a small thing, but people recognize that their leaders are super busy and they took a minute to do that for them. And it's, again, it can really contributes to the culture in the organization. That's a good example. Molly, thoughts on that?
You know, what came to mind, Whitney, is, you know, we talked earlier about coming out of retail together. And I always tell the story of I did a bulletin board in my retail store called the high five board. It was very high tech. I traced my hand on a piece of paper and ran it off in the copy machine. But anyone that was in the building could give a high five to a fellow employee. And I would tell you that it was right by where they checked out and clocked out for the night. And people would stop and read every single one of them and go, oh, look who got one. And so simple. And I think a handwritten note is the best thing you can do. And I always used to write handwritten notes for my people when they did something. And when I left Children's Mercy for the last time and I was walking down the aisle, I looked in the cubes and I saw one of those notes almost in every cube tacked up on the wall, which tells you, and there was a recent stat I saw that said, and I can't remember the percentage, but a large percentage of employee would like praise over a present. And I thought that was very apropos and good thing for leaders to keep in mind. Nice. Yeah, a handwritten note all day. Yeah.
And that needs to be driven from the top, right? It has to be part of the expectations and the culture and the belief from the top that this is something that's important that we spend time on. Even if it doesn't cost money or very little money, we need to spend time on it. So, okay, those are great examples. You both wanted to talk about the topic of compensation and benefits. Whitney, you wanted to talk more about the compensation and reviewing compensation. And Molly, you were focused more on the benefits, but I thought we could maybe combine this topic. Whitney, would you like to start about?
Sure. So I really don't believe that compensation should be tied to your review, right? Like it shouldn't be tied to my you telling me where I am, how I'm achieving goals. I don't think that those two should be tied together because I just don't. I don't think it provides any type of incentive for me to work harder. Now, performance based, compensation, that's different, right? That's based on what I contribute to the company as an individual. But if we're
Right.
just going to do this review once a year and then we're going to pass out this standard 4% across the board, I don't believe
Mm.
that. But I do believe that reviews should happen often, often and timely. I shouldn't wait 3 weeks from now or on your annual review, Patrick, to tell you you suck. Well, I'm
Right.
not going to say it like that, right? But tell you you're not doing
Yeah.
that great of a job.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't have to wait a year to hear that you are doing a good job, right? You shouldn't have to wait a year to hear that. So if we could just separate, like, okay, you get your annual review and this is when you get your raise, versus you just need to be getting continuous feedback on where you are right now. What how are you contributing to the company? Where you could be, what are our expectations, what are your expectations, and just having those constant conversations around it. I think a lot of hiring managers, they manage by exception. So if you are doing really good, you don't hear from me because you're not creating any issues. But
Mm.
then if you're not doing so good, you're here from me all the time, right? You're in my
Mm.
office again because I need to execute this write up. And all of
Right.
the bad ones get all of my time, just because I'm managing by exception. So the other thing is, so organizations, when it comes to compensation, they need to be transparent. One thing, so in Denver, I had a hospital in Colorado, and in Colorado, it is law to display your compensation with the
Right.
job. And
Right.
I like that so much. I really do because it creates first of all, I already know going in, I don't have to ask all of these questions about what's the pay, what's this, but then all of the organizations can see. So I know if you're at the bottom or if you're not competitive, then you won't be getting any candidates. That
Right.
eliminates that. But they need to be honest and transparent about how they determine compensation. How is that determined here? How do we determine compensation?
Mm.
Um,
Interesting.
and then we need to apply that process to everyone, right? We need to make sure that's done across the board. But we also, for me, for reviews, it's not based on the fact that you've been here for a year. If you've been here for a year, you've been sitting on the sidelines the whole year, you haven't benefited us as an
Mm.
organization. But if you've been here for 3 months and you came through the door embracing our culture and learning more and trying to, well, why should both parties get the same raise at the end of the year?
Mm.
It doesn't make sense to me, but that's me. So the other thing is that organizations need to conduct regular market research, right? To
Yes.
understand what the market is and make sure they're within that range to just be competitive.
Sure.
Um, and then this is one thing. Now, I've never worked for an organization that offers this, but I've heard about it because employees have brought it to me. So it's like a flexible compensation package. So this is an example. If I can get health benefits with my husband's employer, then I'll forego that here, but it'll increase my base pay. Right. So I'll say, no, I don't want the medical benefits that you guys are offering. And I say, okay, well, you're not getting medical benefits. Well, in that case, your base pay increases to
Hmm.
this. And I
Interesting.
think that allows for it to be more personalized, right? And maybe I need the medical benefits because my husband is self employed. So we
Right.
need them, right?
Right.
And I don't have that base pay, but I'm getting the medical benefits. So allowing for flexible compensation packages, I believe that that could be beneficial too.
That seems to be the theme there, flexibility, right? And being
Yes.
more open to different ways of doing things. And you mentioned the legislation to require in Colorado that salaries are posted, and I know that's happening in other states as well. I just heard yesterday that I think it was yesterday that it was implemented in the Canadian province of British Columbia. So it's coming, and the point is that employees are demanding it. They're expecting it. And guess what? They're not going to apply. If they're expecting it, they want to know, they're just not going to apply for the one that's hiding, that they see it as hiding, because obviously there's something to hide is the perception. Right. And I think if everyone's forced to put their wages out there, it's good. Everyone's going to become more competitive, right? Yeah. You would think over time. Molly, anything you wanted to add about that? And you want to talk about benefits as well?
Yeah, I think Whitney kind of teed it up. She was talking about flexible compensation strategies. I read on a post on LinkedIn, and I just thought it was so brilliant about a flexible holiday strategy. And I think in healthcare, that is so interesting. So if I don't celebrate the Christian holidays, so maybe I don't do Christmas or Easter, but I celebrate Ramadan or another holiday.
Right.
What if I could swap out and say, I'm going to use my holiday day for the holiday I celebrate? Well, guess what, guys? That could solve some of your Christmas staffing problems, right? Because you're going to allow people to be more flexible with their holidays. And I was like, wow, how inclusive and welcoming does that make your organization when I pick the holidays that are important to me? So I loved that. And I would really like to see that spread. And, I think, and this is a small soapbox, but I will step up and step down really quickly. I don't like bereavement policies with specific lists of who qualifies because of the way our family structures are changing and the way I might have been raised by an aunt, but an aunt isn't on the bereavement list. And I don't think 3 to 5 days is sufficient for most major losses. And I guess this soapbox came to me when we had a woman whose ex-husband passed away and she was denied bereavement. And I was just heartbroken for her and her children. And so I think those are the kind of things, again, it's inclusive. It will help you attract different people. Really quick, I was at HR Tech a few weeks ago and talked to a couple of organizations offering financial planning. And one of the guys I talked to, he's like, did you know if you've been paying on your student loans for 20 years, you can get them forgiven? And I'm like, I had no idea. But they would be there to help your people look at not just the retirement funds with you, but their whole financial picture and help them build a plan to be financially free. Loved that. Daily pay is another one. Like I said, I can go on and on about benefits, but and I think caregiving flexibility, and Whitney was talking about this earlier. If you've got school-age kids, they have odd days off. And what can I do to build caregiving flexibility? And it doesn't have to be for children. It can be for an elder or your neighbor who has cancer that needs transportation or whoever you are responsible for taking care of in your life. And I think some things around those would be really helpful.
Oh, that's really interesting. Really good examples. And I think the other thing about benefits, and I'm laughing because it seems maybe crazy. At least it sounded crazy the first time I heard it. But so often people in their job that they've been in, whether it's a year or 5 years or longer, they don't even know the benefits that they have access to, right? And we might have talked about this on one of our previous webinars, Molly, but it's really important for organizations to make sure your existing employees know about all the benefits that they're entitled to, because if you don't, the competition down the street is reaching out to them in their inbox 5 times a day, telling them about all the wonderful things. And that might look really attractive if they don't even realize they have it in-house at their existing jobs. So communication is really critical. We have a couple minutes left. So I wonder if we could talk a little bit about nurse burnout and proactive measures to counter nurse burnout. Whitney, this was on your list, and I'm sure Molly has some input on this as well. So let's talk about that for a moment.
So I think oftentimes too, sometimes in the organizations, our leaders just don't realize the culture they create. So one thing I mean by that is this. I tell you, hey, Patrick, you're not feeling well today. You should go home. You shouldn't be here. Hey, while you're on PTO, don't respond. Yet I'll stand in front of you and lead a morning meeting at death's door, right? Like I'm telling you these things like, hey, take care of yourself, but I'm also not modeling those things, right? You can see I'm sick, I'm not feeling well, but yet I still show up. So you're telling me one thing, but what I'm receiving, that even if you're sick, even if you don't feel well, you should still be here in some capacity. You should still try to work through it or tough it out. Even if you are on vacation, you should still be available, if we really, really need you. So that's what's communicated to me when I see leaders that say one thing, but then they,
Right.
act contrary to that. The other thing is, one of the things that can counter nervous burnout is being able to train our leaders to be able to recognize signs of burnout too, right? So having a plan in place where, first of all, you can identify like what are the signs of burnout, and then once you recognize it, what do you do with that, right? Because I don't want you to wait for Patrick to come to you and say I'm burned out, right? I want you to be able to say I identified these things, right? And whatever we say are going to be our steps. So now that you identified it, what's next, right? Okay, now we're going to have a conversation with Patrick where we tell him, hey, Patrick, these are the things we observed, and our concern is that if it's not addressed now, this might lead to whatever, whatever, whatever. So just have a plan around that. And then stop glorifying like hustle culture, right?
I'm so
Where
busy.
just be here, just, we got to get it done. We have to stop glorifying that, because the more you do that, it's just mixed messages, right? Because we'll put nice things on paper. We'll say all pretty words, and then our behaviors do not reinforce that. And it's not our words that create culture, it's our actions. So for me, it's just being able to identify it. When you're sick as a leader or when you're on PTO, model the things that you're saying, right? You can tell me take off, but then if I see you here while you're sick, I'm like, but am I really supposed to take off, or should I still show
What's
up?
the actual expectation, right?
What is the actual expectation, and then staffing levels, ensuring that the staffing levels are appropriate. Maybe one day if I have to flex up as a nurse and take more, that's fine. But every week, every day, every shift looks like this. Is I can't do this. One company Indeed does a really cool thing, and they're not in healthcare, but they have this thing called me days. And a me day, you don't use your PTO, you don't use your vacation time. It's a day for you to do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. And for me, that's just a really cool thing. Like that sounds cool. I have a me day. So it's a random Friday, and it's like, hey, I'm not gonna be here. My Indeed representative, I'm not gonna be here yet because I'm taking a me day. And I just was like, man, that's really cool. And then you also mentioned this about employees knowing what's available to them. Sometimes organizations have really good EAP plans, but I handed you this benefits brochure your first day or an orientation. You threw it in the backseat of your car. You never looked at it again. So just making sure we're constantly, maybe it's weekly. We're going to flash meetings, or just, quarterly, whatever it is, just letting them know, hey, these benefits are available to you. So that way, when I do need it, I'll know how to access those benefits.
Wow, those are really great examples. And one of the things that jumped out at me when you talked about the organization needing to be proactive to identify when people are struggling and reach out and help them. We're all our worst advocate, right? We never see how we're being affected as early as we should, and maybe other people can see it first. And it often takes a long time before we acknowledge it to ourselves and then reach out for help. That's a good example. Molly, any last comments before we wrap up?
Whitney, I think you're absolutely right about the EAP program. I can remember going and hearing nurses say, it'd be nice if we had help with this, that, or whatever. And I would go back to our benefits people and I'm like, we need to look at benefits. And they're like, and they would like get really defensive and say, it's in our EAP program. And I'm like, well, I didn't know it was in our EAP program. So how do you expect anyone else to know? And I always say plain language when we're talking about benefits. You don't add a dependent. You have a baby, or you adopt a baby, or something like that. So speaking in the language and making sure that your website says somebody passed away, and then it has all those resources. Because we used to have funeral planning and all sorts of stuff was buried in our EAP. Well, I'm not going to read that on my first day, Patrick. I'm going to need that when somebody passes away that I know.
Right.
Here are the resources, or you're getting married. Fabulous. Here's the checklist of things you need to do to be able to change your name with us and all of that. Same. Here's how to add your new spouse to the benefits. Whatever it is, but speak in the language that somebody actually might be using, because they're really not looking to add a dependent.
Sure.
I don't know anybody
Sure.
who says,
Right.
you know, I'm adding a dependent. No, they say I'm having a baby, for heaven's sake. So plain language would be great.
That's also a great suggestion. Well, all of this has been great. We touched on a number of themes from our 21 strategies blog post, but I think almost every one of them could be its own webinar. It seems like you shared a lot of information. I think it's really interesting. I hope our audience finds it of interest. We might have to have another webinar down the road too, to talk on some of these others. Themes as well. But so I'll encourage people again to go to our website, go to our blog page on our website, check out the 21 Cutting Edge Nurse Recruitment Strategies document, the blog, and also our Nurse Retention Report 2023. And you can dig in a little deeper to all of these themes and many, many others that are so important to the important topic of nurse retention nowadays. So we'll wrap there. I want to thank both Whitney and Molly so much for your time and all of your wisdom that you shared today. It's been really interesting. I shared your LinkedIn earlier, so hopefully people will reach out to you if they have other questions or want to touch base with you, and keep the conversation going. So thanks very much, everyone. Stay tuned for future webinars that we have on nurse recruitment, nurse retention, and general HR topics in healthcare. And we look forward to seeing all of you again. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Molly. Thanks, Whitney.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.